The rain was hitting the windows of the Riverside Music Academy when 8-year-old Alex walked through the big glass doors. His mom held his hand tight as they stepped into the fancy lobby. Everything looked so expensive and perfect. The floors were so shiny you could see your face in them, and there were huge photos of famous piano players hanging on the walls. Alex felt really small in this place. His clothes were too big for him because they used to belong to his older cousin. His sneakers squeaked on the polished floor and he tried to walk quieter so people wouldn't look at him. His mom had saved money for months just to pay for this audition. She worked at 2 different restaurants, coming home late every night with tired feet and food stains on her uniform. "Don't worry, honey," she whispered to Alex. "Just play like you do at home." But this wasn't home. At home, Alex played on an old keyboard they bought from a garage sale. Half the keys made weird sounds and sometimes they got stuck. Here, everything was perfect and scary. The waiting room was full of other kids and their parents. Most of the kids were wearing fancy clothes that probably cost more than Alex's family spent on groceries in a month. One boy was wearing a suit that looked like it came from a movie. A girl had a dress that sparkled when she moved. Their parents were talking about private teachers and summer music camps in Europe. Alex's mom smoothed down his hair for the 10th time. She was nervous too, but she was trying not to show it. "Remember what we practiced," she said softly. "Just breathe and let the music come out." Alex nodded, but his hands were getting sweaty. He wiped them on his pants and hoped nobody noticed. A lady with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard called out names. David Thompson, Julia Martinez, Alex Rivera. When Alex heard his name, his stomach did a little flip. His mom squeezed his shoulder. "You've got this, baby." They followed the lady down a long hallway lined with practice rooms. Alex could hear piano music coming from behind the doors. Some of it sounded really good. Some of it sounded like the kids were struggling. He wondered which group he would fit into. The audition room was huge. It had super high ceilings and windows that went from the floor all the way up. In the middle of the room sat the biggest, most beautiful piano Alex had ever seen. It was so black and shiny it looked like a mirror. The bench was made of real leather, but it wasn't the piano that made Alex nervous. It was the 3 people sitting behind a long table, watching him like judges on a TV show. The man in the middle was older, maybe his grandpa's age, with thick glasses and gray hair that looked messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. His name tag said Professor Petrov. The woman next to him wore a fancy business suit and kept checking her phone. The third person was a younger man who looked bored and kept tapping his pen on the table. Professor Petrov looked up from some papers and saw Alex standing there. A small smile appeared on his face, but not a nice smile. It was the kind of smile adults got when they thought something was funny but didn't want to be mean about it. Well, Professor Petrov said in a thick accent that Alex couldn't place. "What do we have here?" The woman in the suit looked up from her phone and frowned. "Is this the Rivera boy?" "He seems young. 8 years old according to his application," the younger man said, still tapping his pen. "And he wants to audition for our advanced program." Professor Petrov leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Advanced program," he repeated slowly. "Do you know what that means, little boy?" "It means playing music that grown-ups have trouble with. It means practicing for hours every day until your fingers hurt. It means no time for cartoons or video games." Alex felt his face getting hot. He wanted to say that he already practiced every day after school until dinner time. He wanted to tell them that his mom had to tell him to stop playing so he could do his homework. But the words got stuck in his throat. "Can you even reach the pedals?" the woman asked, not looking up from her phone. The younger man started laughing. "Maybe we should get him a phone book to sit on." Professor Petrov joined in the laughter. "Ha, can this kid even play Mary Had a Little Lamb? I mean, look at those tiny hands. If he could play anything more complicated than Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, I'd get down on my knees and promise to make him famous." The other 2 judges laughed even harder. Alex felt tears starting to form in his eyes, but he blinked them away. His mom had taught him to be strong even when people were mean. Alex's mom stepped forward. "Excuse me, but we came here for an audition, not to be made fun of. My son has been playing piano for 3 years and he's very talented." 3 years, Professor Petrov said, raising his eyebrows. "On what, a toy piano?" "A keyboard," Alex's mom said, lifting her chin up. "We saved up for months to buy it." "A keyboard," the woman repeated, finally putting down her phone. "Those plastic things from the store? That's not real piano playing, dear. Alex looked at the beautiful piano in front of him. It was calling to him like it wanted him to play it. He could almost hear music coming from it already. All the songs he knew were swimming around in his head, wanting to come out through his fingers. "Well," Professor Petrov said, checking his watch, "I suppose we should let him try something simple. Maybe Happy Birthday or something like that. We don't want to waste too much time, though. We have real auditions after this." Alex walked slowly to the piano bench. It was higher than he was used to, and his feet didn't touch the floor when he sat down. But when he placed his hands on the keys, something magical happened. The keys felt perfect under his fingers. They were smooth and cool and responded to even the lightest touch. He closed his eyes for a moment and thought about all the times he practiced at home. He thought about his mom working late just so he could have this chance. He thought about all the music inside him that wanted to come out. Alex opened his eyes and looked back at the judges. Professor Petrov was already looking at his papers again. The woman was back on her phone. Only the younger man was watching, and he looked like he was trying not to yawn. "Whenever you're ready," Professor Petrov said without looking up. "Something simple, please." "We don't have all day." Alex turned back to the piano. His hands found their positions on the keys. He took a deep breath just like his mom taught him. And then he began to play, but he didn't play something simple. Instead, his fingers started moving through a piece that was beautiful and complicated and full of emotion. The music filled the huge room and seemed to make the windows vibrate. Every note was perfect. Every rhythm was exactly right. The room went completely silent except for the music coming from the piano. The first notes that came from Alex's fingers made Professor Petrov look up from his papers. It wasn't the simple melody he was expecting. Instead, something beautiful and complex was filling the room. The music was so different from what an 8-year-old should be able to play that for a moment. He thought maybe someone else was playing, but there was Alex, sitting at the huge piano with his feet dangling above the floor, his small hands moving across the keys like he was born to do this. The piece he was playing was Chopin's Ballad No. 1, one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. Most professional piano players spent years learning to play it properly. The woman in the business suit slowly put down her phone. Her mouth fell open a little bit. The younger man stopped tapping his pen and sat up straight in his chair. Even the sound of the rain hitting the windows seemed to disappear as Alex's music took over everything. Alex's fingers danced across the keys with perfect timing. Every note was crystal clear, every rhythm was exactly right. But it wasn't just technically perfect. There was something deeper happening. The music had feelings in it. It told a story without words. It made you think of beautiful things and sad things and hopeful things all at the same time. Professor Petrov had heard this piece played by some of the world's best piano players. He had listened to famous recordings and attended concerts in the greatest halls across Europe. But he had never heard it played with such pure emotion. This wasn't just someone pressing the right keys at the right time. This was real music, the kind that reaches into your heart and squeezes it. The difficult parts of the piece were coming up, the sections where most students would slow down or make mistakes. But Alex played through them like they were easy. His left hand handled the deep, powerful bass notes while his right hand created the beautiful melody on top. It looked impossible for someone with such small hands, but somehow he was making it work perfectly. Alex's mom was standing by the door, holding her breath. She had heard him play this piece at home many times, but this was different. The big, expensive piano brought out sounds from the music that their little keyboard could never make. Every note rang out clear and strong, filling the huge room with beauty. Tears started forming in her eyes as she watched her little boy doing something that seemed magical. All those nights when she came home tired from work and heard him still practicing. All those times she wanted to tell him to come eat dinner but didn't want to interrupt his music. It was all worth it for this moment. The middle section of the piece was coming now. The part that always gave Alex trouble at home. It required his hands to move in opposite directions while playing completely different rhythms. It was like trying to rub your stomach and pat your head, but 1,000 times harder. Professional piano players called this part a nightmare, but Alex didn't even slow down. His hands moved independently like they had minds of their own. The music became more intense, more passionate. You could feel the emotions building up, getting stronger and stronger until it felt like the room might explode from all the beauty. Professor Petrov felt something he hadn't felt in years. His hands started shaking. In 30 years of teaching piano, he had heard thousands of students play. Most of them were good. Some of them were very good. A few were excellent. But this was something completely different. This was the kind of talent that comes along once in a lifetime. The woman judge was gripping the edge of the table. She had studied music in college and thought she knew what good piano playing sounded like. But Alex was showing her that everything she thought she knew was wrong. This wasn't just good piano playing. This was art happening right in front of her eyes. The younger man had completely forgotten about being bored. He was leaning forward in his chair, watching Alex's hands move across the keys with perfect precision. He kept shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. An 8-year-old kid was playing music that most adults couldn't even dream of playing. As the piece moved toward its ending, the music became even more powerful. Alex's whole body was involved now, swaying slightly with the rhythm, putting his entire being into every note. The beautiful melody soared above the strong bass notes like a bird flying over mountains. The final section required incredible finger strength and speed. Notes came flying out of the piano so fast they almost blurred together, but each one was perfectly clear. Alex's concentration was complete. Nothing else existed for him except the music and the piano. The rest of the world had disappeared. Then came the last few measures where the music builds to an incredible climax before ending with a few soft, gentle notes. Alex played these final moments with such tenderness that it felt like he was saying goodbye to someone he loved. The last note hung in the air for what seemed like forever before slowly fading away. When the music stopped, the silence in the room was so complete you could hear people breathing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone was still trapped in the spell that Alex's music had cast over them. Alex turned around on the piano bench and looked at the judges with innocent eyes. "Should I play something else?" he asked in his small, quiet voice. That's when Professor Petrov's world completely changed. The words he had spoken just minutes before came rushing back to him. If he could play anything more complicated than Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, I get down on my knees and promise to make him famous. His hands were shaking so badly now that he had to grip the table to steady himself. Slowly, very slowly, he stood up from his chair. His legs felt weak, like they might not hold him up. The other judges watched in shock as he walked around the table toward Alex. "I have been teaching piano for 30 years, Professor Petrov said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I have heard students from the best music schools in the world. I have listened to concerts by famous pianists in the greatest halls." He stopped in front of Alex, who was still sitting on the piano bench, looking up at him with curious eyes. "But I have never, in all my years, heard anything like what you just played," Professor Petrov continued. "You didn't just play that piece. You made it come alive. You made it breathe. You made it sing." Then, to everyone's complete shock, Professor Petrov slowly lowered himself down onto his knees in front of the 8-year-old boy. "I made you a promise," he said, looking directly into Alex's eyes. "I said if you could play real music, I would kneel down and promise to make you famous. Well, here I am on my knees and I'm making you that promise right now." Alex's mom gasped and put her hand over her mouth. The other judges sat frozen in their chairs, unable to believe what they were seeing. The most respected piano teacher in the country was kneeling in front of a little boy from a poor family. "I will personally make sure you become the legend you were born to be," Professor Petrov said, his voice full of determination. "I will teach you everything I know. I will open every door for you. The world needs to hear your music." Alex looked confused. He didn't understand why the scary man was being so nice to him now, or why everyone looked so surprised. He had just played a song he liked. That's what he always did. What happened next changed everything for Alex and his family. The younger judge had been secretly recording the audition on his phone, something he did sometimes to help students review their performances later. But when he saw Professor Petrov drop to his knees in front of an 8-year-old boy, he knew this was something special. Without thinking twice, he posted the video on social media with a simple caption. "A piano teacher with 30 years of experience just knelt down and promised to make this 8-year-old a legend. Wait until you hear why." Within an hour, the video had been shared 50 times. By dinner time, it had reached 1,000 shares. By midnight, over 100,000 people had watched Alex's audition. Comments poured in from all over the world. Professional musicians were calling it impossible and life-changing. Regular people were crying while watching it. "This kid just made me believe in magic," again, wrote one viewer. I've been playing piano for 20 years and I can't play half as well as this. Child, commented a music teacher from another state. Professor, Petrov never kneels for anyone. This boy must be something truly special, added a former student who recognized the teacher. But Alex and his mom didn't know about any of this yet. They had gone home after the audition, both feeling overwhelmed by what had happened. Alex's mom, Rosa, made his favorite dinner, rice and beans with a little bit of chicken, while trying to process what Professor Petrov had promised. Mama, why did that man get on his knees? Alex asked while eating. Did I do something wrong? Rosa smiled and touched her son's face gently. No, baby. You did something amazing. That man has taught piano to hundreds of students, and he's never seen anyone play like you. But I just played the song like always, Alex said, confused. It's the same song I practice at home. Rosa didn't know how to explain that what her son could do was extraordinary. To Alex, playing beautiful music was as natural as breathing. He didn't understand that most people, even very talented people, couldn't do what he had just done. The next morning, Rosa's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. The first call was from a local news station wanting to interview Alex. Then a radio station called. Then another TV station. By 8 o'clock, there were reporters knocking on their apartment door. Rosa was scared and confused. She didn't understand how these people had found them or why they wanted to talk to Alex. She kept the door locked and told Alex to stay in his room, but the reporters wouldn't leave. More kept coming throughout the day. Some had big cameras. Others had microphones. A few were just people with phones who said they worked for online news websites. Mrs. Rivera, they called through the door. We just want to talk to Alex about his incredible piano playing. The whole world wants to hear his story. Rosa called the school to say Alex wouldn't be coming in that day. She was too afraid to leave the apartment with all those people outside. She had no idea what to do. Around noon, there was a different kind of knock on the door. Rosa looked through the peephole and saw Professor Petrov standing there, holding a large bouquet of flowers and looking very serious. Mrs. Rivera, it's Professor Petrov from the academy. I need to speak with you urgently. Rosa hesitated for a moment, then opened the door just enough to let him in. The reporters immediately started shouting questions and taking pictures, but Professor Petrov ignored them completely. I am so sorry about this chaos, he said once Rosa had closed and locked the door behind him. I had no idea that young man was recording yesterday. He handed Rosa the flowers and sat down heavily on their small couch. Their living room was tiny compared to the fancy academy, with mismatched furniture and toys scattered around. But Professor Petrov didn't seem to notice or care. Mrs. Rivera, I want you to understand something very important, he said in his thick accent. What your son did yesterday, that level of playing at his age, it's something I've never seen before. Not in 30 years of teaching. Not in all the concerts I've attended around the world. Rosa sat down across from him, still holding the flowers. But all this attention, I don't understand. He's just a little boy who likes to play piano. That's exactly the point, Professor Petrov said. He's not just playing piano. He's creating art. He's touching people's souls. That video of his audition has been viewed over 1 million times in less than 24 hours. Rosa's eyes went wide. 1 million times? She couldn't even imagine that many people. People are calling him a miracle, Professor Petrov continued. Musicians from famous orchestras are asking to meet him. Music schools from other countries want to offer him scholarships. This is the beginning of something incredible for Alex. But Rosa looked worried instead of excited. Professor, we're simple people. Alex's father left when he was 3. I work 2 jobs just to pay rent. We don't know anything about this world you're talking about. Professor Petrov leaned forward and spoke gently. That's exactly why I'm here. I made Alex a promise yesterday and I intend to keep it. But I want to do this right. With your permission and your comfort. He pulled out some papers from his briefcase. I want to offer Alex a full scholarship to our academy. Not just the lessons, but everything. Books, sheet music, even help with transportation. And I want to personally be his teacher. Rosa stared at the papers but didn't touch them. What does that mean for Alex? For his childhood? It means he'll still be a normal boy, Professor Petrov said. He'll still go to regular school, still have time to play with friends, but he'll also get the training his talent deserves. Mrs. Rivera, your son has a gift that could bring joy to millions of people. Don't you want to help him share that gift with the world? From his bedroom, Alex called out, Mama, can I come out now? I want to practice piano. Rosa and Professor Petrov looked at each other and started laughing. Here they were, talking about Alex's future and worldwide fame. And all he wanted to do was play piano. You can come out, baby, Rosa called back. Alex ran into the living room and stopped when he saw Professor Petrov. Hi, he said shyly. Are you still going to teach me piano? Professor Petrov smiled and got down on one knee so he could look Alex in the eyes. Alex, I would be honored to be your teacher. But first, I need to ask you something very important. Do you want to learn more about piano? Do you want to get better at playing? Alex nodded eagerly. Yes, I want to learn all the songs. I want to play like the people in the videos Mama shows me on her phone. Then we have a deal, Professor Petrov said, holding out his hand for Alex to shake. But you have to promise me something. Promise me you'll always remember that music should make you happy. No matter how famous you become or how many people want to hear you play, never forget that the most important thing is loving the music. Alex shook the professor's hand solemnly. I promise. Rosa watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. She didn't fully understand what was happening to their lives, but she could see that this man truly cared about her son, and she could see the excitement in Alex's eyes when he talked about learning more music. Okay, she said quietly. Let's try this. But if Alex ever stops being happy, if this becomes too much for him, we stop. Deal? Professor Petrov stood up and shook Rosa's hand too. Deal. And Mrs. Rivera? I think you're about to discover that your son isn't just going to be famous. He's going to change the way people think about music. Outside, the reporters were still waiting, and Alex's video was still spreading across the internet like wildfire. But inside the small apartment, a little boy was about to begin a journey that would transform him from an unknown kid with a gift into something the world had never seen before. 2 weeks later, Alex's new life began. Every day after regular school, Rosa would drive him to the Riverside Music Academy in their old car that made strange noises when it went uphill. The first day was scary for both of them. Alex had never been to such a fancy place every day, and Rosa worried about whether they really belonged there. Professor Petrov was waiting for them in practice room number 7. It was smaller than the big audition room, but it still had a beautiful grand piano and windows that looked out at the garden. On the music stand, there were thick books full of exercises and scales that looked very difficult. Today we start from the beginning, Professor Petrov announced. Alex, you have natural talent that is extraordinary, but talent without proper training is like having a race car without knowing how to drive it safely. Alex looked confused. But I already know how to play piano. Professor Petrov smiled kindly. You know how to make beautiful music, yes. But there is so much more to learn. Your hands need to be stronger, your fingers need to move faster and more precisely, and most importantly, you need to understand music theory, the rules that help you create even more beautiful sounds. The first lesson was harder than Alex expected. Professor Petrov made him play scales over and over again. Up and down the piano, the same patterns of notes for 30 minutes straight. Alex's hands started getting tired in ways they never had before. Why do I have to play these boring exercises? Alex asked. They don't sound pretty like the songs I know. Think of them like sports training, Professor Petrov explained. Basketball players practice shooting the same shot hundreds of times so they can make it perfectly during a game. These scales will make your fingers strong and fast so you can play any song you want. After scales came finger exercises that were even more challenging. Alex had to play different rhythms with each hand at the same time. His left hand would play slow, steady notes while his right hand played quick, dancing melodies. It was like trying to pat your head and rub your stomach, but much harder. By the end of the first lesson, Alex's hands hurt and he felt frustrated. This wasn't the fun kind of piano playing he was used to. At home, he just played songs he liked. Here, everything was work and rules and exercises. I don't like this, he told his mom on the drive home. It's not fun anymore. Rosa felt her heart break a little. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe they should just let Alex play piano for fun instead of trying to make him into something special. But Professor Petrov had warned her this might happen. Every great musician goes through this phase, he had said. The excitement of being discovered wears off and the real work begins. This is when we find out if someone really wants to be great or if they just want to be famous. The next day was even harder. Professor Petrov introduced something called etudes, study pieces that were designed to teach specific skills. They sounded beautiful when Professor Petrov played them. But when Alex tried, They were incredibly difficult. My fingers don't want to do this, Alex complained after struggling with the same passage for 20 minutes. That's exactly the point, Professor Petrov said patiently. We're teaching your fingers to do things they've never done before. It's like learning a new language. At first nothing makes sense, but slowly it becomes natural. Week after week the lessons continued. Some days Alex loved it. When he finally mastered a difficult piece or when Professor Petrov showed him a new technique that made a song sound even more beautiful, Alex felt like he was flying. But other days were pure struggle. The hardest part wasn't just the music. It was the time. Alex now practiced 4 hours every day after school. While his friends were playing video games or watching cartoons, Alex was sitting at the piano working on finger exercises and memorizing complicated pieces. His old friends from school started treating him differently too. At first they thought it was cool that Alex was becoming famous. But as weeks turned into months, they got tired of him always being busy with piano practice. You never want to hang out anymore, his best friend Luis complained. All you care about now is that stupid piano. Alex felt torn in half. He loved music more than anything, but he missed just being a regular kid sometimes. He missed playing soccer with his friends. He missed being able to watch movies without worrying about practicing. One particularly difficult day, Alex had been working on a piece by Bach for 2 hours. His fingers kept stumbling over the same section, and he couldn't get it right no matter how many times he tried. He was tired, frustrated, and ready to quit. I can't do this, he shouted, pulling his hands away from the keys. It's too hard. I want to go home. Professor Petrov didn't get angry. Instead, he sat down next to Alex on the piano bench and was quiet for a moment. You know, Professor Petrov said slowly, when I was about your age, I wanted to quit piano too. Alex looked at him in surprise. Really? Really? I was 10 years old and my teacher was making me practice scales for hours every day. My hands hurt. I was missing out on playing with friends and I thought music was supposed to be fun, not work. What happened? Did you quit? Professor Petrov smiled. I almost did. But then my teacher taught me something important. He showed me that the hard work wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Every scale I practiced, every difficult exercise I mastered was like adding another color to my paintbrush. The more colors I had, the more beautiful pictures I could paint with music. Alex thought about this. So the boring exercises help me play prettier songs? Exactly. And someday, when you're playing in front of thousands of people, when you're creating music that makes people cry with joy, you'll be grateful for every hard day you push through. Professor Petrov stood up and walked to the window. But Alex, I want you to know something else. If you decide this is too much, if you want to just play piano for fun at home, that's okay too. Being great at something requires sacrifice, and not everyone wants to make those sacrifices. There's no shame in choosing an easier path. Alex looked at the piano keys, thinking hard. He remembered how it felt when he played his audition piece and saw grown-ups cry. He remembered the comments on the video from people saying his music made them feel better when they were sad. He thought about all the beautiful songs he still wanted to learn to play. I don't want to quit, Alex said quietly. But can we take a break today? My hands really hurt. Professor Petrov laughed and ruffled Alex's hair. Of course we can take a break. You know what? Let's forget about exercises today. Play me something you love, something that makes you happy. Alex's face lit up. He started playing a gentle melody he had learned when he first started piano. It wasn't complicated or flashy, but it was beautiful and it came from his heart. As he played, he remembered why he loved music in the first place. When he finished, Professor Petrov was smiling proudly. That's why we practice so hard, he said. So you can always play from your heart, no matter how difficult the music becomes. From that day forward, Alex approached his training differently. He still struggled with difficult pieces and got frustrated with finger exercises. But now he understood that every challenge was helping him become better at the thing he loved most. His hands grew stronger. His fingers moved faster. His understanding of music became deeper. And slowly, very slowly, Alex began to transform from a talented little boy into something much more extraordinary. After 6 months of intense training, Alex's skills had grown dramatically. His fingers moved with the speed and precision that amazed even Professor Petrov. His understanding of music had deepened, and he could now read the most complex sheet music like it was a simple children's book. But with success came new problems that nobody had expected. The first sign of trouble came during a practice session at the academy. Alex was working on a particularly challenging piece when he noticed another student, Daniel, watching him from the doorway. Daniel was 12 years old and had been studying at the academy for 4 years. He was considered one of their most promising students, until Alex arrived. "Show off," Daniel muttered under his breath as he walked past Alex's practice room. At first, Alex didn't understand why some of the older students seemed unfriendly. He tried to say hello to them in the hallways, but they would just look away or whisper to each other when he passed. During group lessons, when Professor Petrov would use Alex as an example of proper technique, Alex could feel the other students staring at him with cold eyes. The situation got worse when local newspapers started writing articles about Alex. The headlines called him the miracle boy and the piano prodigy who's taking the world by storm. Pictures of Alex at the piano appeared in magazines, and his story was featured on the Academy's website as their star student. This made some parents angry. Mrs. Henderson, whose daughter Katie had been taking lessons at the Academy for 3 years, cornered Professor Petrov after a recital. "I don't understand why Alex gets so much attention," she said loudly enough for other parents to hear. "My Katie works just as hard. She practices every day too. But all anyone talks about is this boy who's been here for 6 months. "Mrs. Henderson," Professor Petrov replied calmly, "Alex's situation is unique. His natural ability combined with his dedication creates opportunities that we must support." "Unique?" Mrs. Henderson's voice got louder. "You mean he gets special treatment because he's famous now? What about the students who've been loyal to this academy for years? Don't they deserve the same chances?" Other parents began nodding in agreement. Mr. Thompson, whose son had been rejected from the advanced program, stepped forward. "My son David has been playing piano since he was 5, he said. "He's 13 now and still can't get into advanced classes. But this 8-year-old shows up and immediately gets private lessons with the head instructor? How is that fair?" Alex heard these conversations happening around him. He didn't fully understand all the adult politics, but he could feel that his presence was causing problems. Some days he felt like he was walking through a minefield, never knowing when someone might say something hurtful. The breaking point came during the Academy's monthly student recital. These events were supposed to celebrate all the students' progress, but this one felt different. Alex was scheduled to perform last, which traditionally was the spot reserved for the most advanced piece. As student after student performed, Alex could feel the tension in the room. When Daniel played his piece on a beautiful but moderately difficult sonata, the audience clapped politely. When Katie played her composition, her parents cheered enthusiastically, but everyone else seemed distracted. Then it was Alex's turn. He walked to the piano and sat down to play Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, one of the most technically demanding pieces in classical piano literature. It was a piece that most professional pianists found challenging, let alone a 9-year-old boy. As Alex began to play, the room fell completely silent. His fingers flew across the keys with impossible speed and accuracy. The music was wild and passionate, full of dramatic pauses and explosive runs. It was the kind of performance that left audiences breathless. But when Alex finished and stood up to bow, something terrible happened. Instead of applause, there was an uncomfortable silence. A few people clapped slowly, but most of the audience just sat there. Then someone in the back row started clapping very slowly and sarcastically. "Wonderful," said a voice that Alex recognized as Mr. Thompson. "I guess we now know who the real star of this academy is. The rest of our children might as well go home." Other parents began murmuring agreement. "This isn't a recital anymore," someone said. "It's just a showcase for one student." Alex felt his face turn red with embarrassment. He hadn't meant to make anyone feel bad. He had just played the piece the way Professor Petrov taught him. But now it seemed like his success was hurting other people. Professor Petrov stood up quickly and tried to restore order. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remember that this is a celebration of all our students' hard work." But the damage was done. Parents were gathering their things and leaving early. Students were looking at Alex with expressions ranging from anger to sadness. Katie was crying because she felt like her performance had been forgotten. After everyone left, Alex sat alone at the piano while Professor Petrov talked quietly with his mother in the corner. He could hear fragments of their conversation. Jealousy is natural, but Alex shouldn't suffer for their insecurities. Maybe we should find a different academy, somewhere. Alex won't cause so much trouble. Absolutely. Not running away won't solve anything. Alex felt terrible. He loved music more than anything in the world, but he was starting to understand that his gift came with a price. Other people's feelings got hurt when he played well. Parents got angry because their children weren't as talented. Students felt discouraged because they couldn't play like he could. That night at home, Alex asked his mother a question that broke her heart. "Mama, would everyone be happier if I wasn't so good at piano?" Rosa sat down on his bed and pulled him close. "Oh, baby, no. Don't ever think that. Your gift is beautiful. It brings joy to people all over the world. But it makes the kids at the academy sad, and their parents get angry. Maybe I should just play easier songs so I don't make them feel bad." Rosa thought carefully about her answer. She knew that Alex was facing something that many gifted children experience: the burden of being different, of standing out in ways that sometimes made others uncomfortable. "Alex, listen to me," she said gently. "When you have a special gift, it's not your job to make it smaller, so other people feel better. Your job is to use your gift in the best way you can and to be kind to others while you do it. But what if they keep being mean to me? Then we'll deal with it together. Professor Petrov will help us too. But we're not going to let other people's jealousy stop you from becoming everything you're meant to be." The next day, Professor Petrov called a meeting with all the parents and students at the academy. He addressed the situation head-on. "Excellence should inspire us, not divide us," he told the group. "Alex's talent doesn't take anything away from your children's abilities. In fact, being around exceptional musicians makes everyone better." He announced new policies to ensure all students felt valued and supported. There would be more performance opportunities for everyone. Advanced students would mentor younger ones. And most importantly, the academy would focus on each student's individual progress rather than comparing them to others. Some families left the academy anyway, unable to accept that Alex's presence was permanent. But others stayed and gradually learned to appreciate the inspiration that came from witnessing true greatness. Alex learned an important lesson during this difficult time. Being gifted wasn't just about playing beautiful music. It was also about handling the complicated emotions and relationships that came with standing out from the crowd. He began to understand that his journey to greatness would involve more than just mastering difficult pieces. He would also need to learn how to navigate a world that wasn't always ready to celebrate someone who was truly exceptional. 3 years had passed since Alex's viral audition, and now at 11 years old, he was about to face the biggest challenge of his life. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Alex was getting ready for school. Professor Petrov's voice was trembling with excitement as he spoke to Rosa. "They want Alex to perform with the National Symphony Orchestra," he said, "at Carnegie Hall. He would be the youngest soloist in the venue's history." Rosa almost dropped the phone. Carnegie Hall was the most famous concert hall in America. The greatest musicians in the world had performed on that stage, and now they were asking her 11-year-old son to play there. "Are you sure he's ready for something this big?" Rosa asked, watching Alex eat his cereal at their small kitchen table, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. "Rosa, Alex has been ready for this since the day I met him," Professor Petrov replied. "His technique is flawless now. His musical understanding is deeper than some professional pianists I know. But more importantly, he has something that can't be taught: the ability to touch people's hearts with his music." The invitation was to perform Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beloved and challenging pieces in the classical piano repertoire. It was a piece that demanded not just technical perfection, but emotional maturity that seemed impossible for someone Alex's age. When they told Alex about the opportunity, his reaction surprised everyone. Instead of excitement, he looked terrified. "Carnegie Hall?" he whispered. "That's where all the famous people play. What if I mess up? What if I forget the notes? What if people think I'm not good enough?" For the first time in 3 years, Alex was experiencing real stage fright. The pressure of performing in front of thousands of people, many of them professional musicians and critics, was overwhelming. This wasn't like playing at the academy where everyone knew him. This was the big leagues. Professor Petrov understood Alex's fear. "You know," he said gently, "I played at Carnegie Hall once when I was 25 years old. I was so nervous I couldn't eat for 2 days before the concert. Really? Alex asked. But you're such a good teacher. I thought you were never scared. Being nervous doesn't mean you're not good enough, Professor Petrov explained. It means you care about doing your best. The greatest performers in the world still get nervous. The difference is they don't let the fear stop them from sharing their gift. The preparation for Carnegie Hall was unlike anything Alex had experienced. For 6 months, he worked on the Rachmaninoff concerto with an intensity that amazed even Professor Petrov. Every day after school, Alex practiced for 5 hours. On weekends, he worked for 8 hours straight, only stopping for meals. The piece was incredibly demanding physically. Alex's hands had to stretch across the keys in ways that seemed impossible for someone his size. There were sections where he had to play thunderous, powerful chords that shook the entire piano, followed immediately by delicate, whisper-soft melodies that required perfect control. My hands hurt so much. Alex complained one evening after a particularly grueling practice session. That's your hands getting stronger, Professor Petrov replied. By the time you walk onto that stage at Carnegie Hall, your hands will be able to handle anything this piece demands. But it wasn't just the physical challenges that were difficult. The emotional content of the piece was incredibly complex. Rachmaninoff had written this concerto during one of the darkest periods of his life, and the music reflected deep sadness, passionate love, and triumphant joy all within the same piece. How can I play music about feelings I've never had? Alex asked during one lesson. I'm 11. I don't know about the sad things grown-ups feel. Professor Petrov thought carefully about this question. Alex, you may not have experienced adult heartbreak or loss, but you have felt emotions. Remember how you felt when the other students were mean to you at the academy? Remember how proud you felt when you finally mastered that difficult Bach piece? Those feelings are the same ones Rachmaninoff was writing about, just at a different level. Slowly, Alex began to understand how to connect his own experiences to the music. When he played the sad sections, he thought about times he felt lonely or misunderstood. When he played the triumphant parts, he remembered the joy of overcoming difficult challenges. The music began to feel personal to him, not just like notes on a page. As the date of the concert approached, the pressure intensified. Newspapers and music magazines wrote articles about the boy wonder who would conquer Carnegie Hall. Television shows wanted to interview Alex. Classical music websites posted videos of his practice sessions that Professor Petrov had shared. What if I don't live up to what people expect? Alex asked his mother one night before bed. What if I disappoint everyone? Rosa sat on his bed and stroked his hair. Baby, you could never disappoint me. You could play 1 note or 1,000 notes and I would still be the proudest mama in the world. All these other people, they don't matter. What matters is that you do your best and remember why you love music. The week before the concert, Alex's nerves reached a breaking point. During a practice session with the orchestra, a group of professional musicians who had played with some of the world's greatest artists, Alex's hands started shaking so badly he couldn't play. The conductor, Maestro Williams, stopped the orchestra and walked over to the piano. Alex, may I tell you something? Alex nodded, too embarrassed to speak. I have conducted orchestras for 30 years, Maestro Williams said. I have worked with pianists who are famous around the world. But in all those years, I have never heard anyone play this piece with the pure emotion that you bring to it. These musicians behind me, they're excited to play with you. Not because you're 11 years old, but because you're an artist. The orchestra members nodded and smiled at Alex. The principal violinist said, Alex, when you play, you make us remember why we fell in love with music in the first place. Hearing this from professional musicians helped Alex realize something important. These people weren't judging him for his age or expecting him to fail. They genuinely wanted to make beautiful music together. On the morning of the concert, Alex woke up feeling different. The terror was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Excitement. He had worked harder for this moment than he had ever worked for anything in his life. His hands were strong. His memory was perfect. His understanding of the music was deep and personal. Are you ready? Professor Petrov asked as they stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, listening to the sounds of 2,800 people taking their seats. Alex looked out at the stage where the beautiful concert grand piano waited for him. Behind it, the full orchestra was tuning their instruments. In a few minutes, he would walk out there and either triumph or fail in front of thousands of people. But as he stood there, Alex realized something that surprised him. He wasn't just scared anymore. He was eager to share the music he loved with all these people. He wanted them to feel the same joy and sadness and triumph that he felt every time he played this piece. "I'm ready," Alex said, and for the first time in months he truly meant it. The stage manager approached them. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time." Alex straightened his bow tie, took a deep breath, and prepared to walk onto the stage that would change his life forever. Alex walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage and immediately felt like he was stepping into a dream. The hall was enormous, much bigger than he had imagined. Rows and rows of red velvet seats stretched up to the ceiling, packed with people who had come from all over the world to hear him play. The stage lights were so bright he could barely see the audience, but he could feel their presence like electricity in the air. The applause was thunderous as he made his way to the piano. People were standing up clapping, and some were even cheering. Alex had never experienced anything like this before. His heart was beating so fast he thought everyone in the hall could probably hear it. He sat down at the beautiful Steinway grand piano and adjusted the bench. The orchestra behind him was silent, waiting for his signal. Maestro Williams stood ready with his baton raised. In this moment, Alex felt the weight of everything that had brought him here. All the hours of practice, all the encouragement from Professor Petrov, all the sacrifices his mother had made. But then something unexpected happened. As Alex placed his hands on the keys, all the nervousness just melted away. The piano felt like an old friend welcoming him home. The keys were perfectly balanced under his fingers. The sound was so pure and rich that even a single note seemed to fill the entire hall with beauty. Alex looked up at Maestro Williams and nodded. The conductor raised his baton, and the orchestra began the opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The music started softly, with just a few instruments playing a gentle, romantic melody. Alex listened carefully, counting the measures until it was time for him to join in. When his moment came, Alex's fingers found the keys and the first piano notes rang out clear and strong. But something was wrong. One of the keys in the middle section of the piano made a strange clicking sound instead of the pure tone it should have made. Alex's heart skipped a beat. There was something mechanically wrong with the piano. In the audience, Professor Petrov noticed the problem immediately. His hands gripped the armrests of his seat as he realized what was happening. A stuck key during a Carnegie Hall debut could be a disaster. Many young performers would panic in this situation and make mistakes throughout the rest of the piece. But Alex didn't panic. Instead, he did something that amazed everyone who understood music. When he reached passages that would normally use that problematic key, he instantly changed the fingering to avoid it. He moved the melody to different notes that created the same musical effect. It was like a jazz musician improvising, except he was doing it in the middle of one of the most challenging classical pieces ever written. The orchestra members noticed what Alex was doing and watched in awe. They had seen professional pianists get flustered by much smaller problems. But this 11-year-old boy was solving the issue in real time while continuing to play some of the most difficult music ever composed. As the first movement continued, Alex found creative ways to work around the broken key. When the music called for thunderous, powerful chords that should have included that note, he rearranged the harmony to create an even more dramatic effect. When delicate passages needed that particular tone, he found substitute notes that actually made the melody more interesting. The audience didn't know there was a problem. To them, Alex was simply giving an extraordinary performance. His playing was passionate and mature, full of emotion that seemed impossible from someone so young. The way he shaped each phrase, the way he balanced the loud and soft sections, the way he communicated with the orchestra, it was all perfect. But backstage, the piano technicians were having a crisis. During the brief pause between movements, they wanted to rush onto the stage and fix the problem. However, Carnegie Hall's stage manager made a decision that would become legendary in the venue's history. "Let the boy finish," he whispered into his headset. "He's handling it better than most professionals would. Don't interrupt this magic." The second movement of the concerto began with one of the most beautiful melodies in all of classical music. It was slow and incredibly emotional, requiring the pianist to sing through the keys rather than just play notes. This was where Alex's ability to connect with the music really showed. As he played, Alex thought about all the people who had supported him on this journey. He thought about his mother working late shifts to pay for his lessons, He thought about Professor Petrov believing in him when nobody else would. He thought about the orchestra members who had encouraged him during rehearsals. All of these feelings poured into his playing. The hall was completely silent except for the music. People in the audience were holding their breath, afraid that any sound might break the spell Alex was creating. Some had tears in their eyes. Others sat with their mouths open in amazement. Professional musicians in the crowd were shaking their heads in disbelief at what they were hearing. In the VIP section, several famous pianists who had come to hear the Boy Wonder were completely stunned. One of them whispered to his companion, "I've been playing piano for 40 years, and I've never heard this piece played with such natural musicality." A renowned music critic who had come, expecting to write a negative review about a child being given too much attention, was furiously scribbling notes. Later he would write that Alex's performance redefined what it means to be a musician, and that age became completely irrelevant when faced with such pure artistry. The third and final movement was the most challenging part of the entire piece. It required incredible speed, power, and stamina. Alex's hands had to move like lightning across the keys while maintaining perfect control and musical expression. This was the section that separated good pianists from great ones. As the movement began, Alex felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. The broken key was no longer a problem. It had become part of his artistic interpretation. Every time he had to work around it, he created something even more beautiful than the original. The orchestra was inspired by Alex's performance and played with an energy that surprised even themselves. The communication between the young soloist and the experienced musicians was perfect. They were no longer just playing notes written on a page. They were creating art together. As the piece built toward its climactic ending, the entire hall seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the music. Alex's hands were flying across the keys with impossible speed and precision. The broken key forced him to use fingerings that actually made the music sound more brilliant and exciting than the traditional version. The final chords rang out with such power that they seemed to shake the very foundation of Carnegie Hall. Alex held the last note until it faded completely into silence. Then he lifted his hands from the keys and sat still for a moment, breathing heavily from the effort. The silence that followed lasted for what felt like an eternity. Nobody in the audience moved. Nobody breathed. It was as if the entire hall was still under the spell of the music Alex had just created. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Then another. Then suddenly, the entire hall erupted in the longest, loudest standing ovation in Carnegie Hall's recent history. People were cheering, crying, and applauding so loudly that Alex could feel the sound waves washing over him like ocean waves. The applause went on for 23 minutes, an almost unheard of length for a classical music performance. People refused to stop clapping and cheering. They wanted Alex to know that they had just witnessed something truly extraordinary. 7 years had passed since that magical night at Carnegie Hall, and Alex was now 18 years old. The boy who had once needed help reaching the piano pedals had grown into a young man who commanded stages around the world. But success had brought challenges that nobody could have predicted when he was just an 8-year-old with a gift. The teenage years had been especially difficult. While his friends were going to parties, dating, and experiencing normal high school life, Alex was traveling to concerts in different countries almost every weekend. He missed his prom because he was performing in Vienna. He couldn't join the school soccer team because his hands were too valuable to risk injury. Sometimes he felt like he was living in a beautiful prison made of music. "I just want to be normal for a while," he had told his mother during a particularly difficult period when he was 16. "I want to hang out with friends without worrying about practicing. I want to make mistakes without the whole world watching." For several months, Alex had rebelled against his demanding schedule. He skipped practice sessions, showed up late for lessons, and even canceled a few small concerts. Professor Petrov, now in his 70s and moving more slowly, was patient but worried. "Alex, I understand you're tired," Professor Petrov had said during one of their talks. "Being extraordinary comes with a price, but you have a choice to make. You can choose to see your gift as a burden, or you can choose to see it as a responsibility to share beauty with the world." The turning point came when Alex met a young girl named Sophie at a children's hospital where he was doing a charity performance. Sophie was only 7 years old and was battling a serious illness. She had watched videos of Alex's Carnegie Hall performance online dozens of times. "Your music makes me forget about being sick," she told Alex with a shy smile. "When I listen to you play, I feel like I'm flying." That conversation changed everything for Alex. He realized that his music wasn't just about him anymore. It had the power to heal, to comfort, and to bring joy to people who needed it most. His gift wasn't a burden. It was a way to make the world a little bit better. Now at 18, Alex was preparing for what many people were calling the most important concert of his career. The Vienna State Opera had invited him to perform a solo recital featuring both classical masterpieces and his own original compositions. This wasn't just another performance. This was Alex announcing to the world that he had grown from a child prodigy into a mature artist with his own unique voice. The pressure was enormous. Music critics from around the world would be in attendance. The concert would be broadcast live to millions of viewers across 6 continents. If Alex succeeded, he would cement his place among the greatest pianists of his generation. If he failed, people might say he was just a childhood novelty who couldn't maintain his excellence as an adult. But this time, Alex felt different about the pressure. He had learned to channel his nervousness into excitement. He had discovered that the butterflies in his stomach weren't a sign of fear, they were a sign that he cared deeply about sharing something beautiful with people. The program Alex had chosen was ambitious and deeply personal. He would start with Bach's Goldberg Variations, a piece that required incredible technical precision and mathematical understanding. Then he would play Chopin's Ballad No. 1, the same piece that had amazed the judges at his very first audition 10 years ago. But the second half of the concert would be something completely new. 3 original compositions that Alex had written himself. Writing his own music had been Professor Petrov's idea. "You have mastered the language of classical music," he had said. "Now it's time to find your own voice within that language." Alex's compositions were unlike anything being written by other young composers. They combined the technical complexity of classical music with melodies that felt fresh and modern. They told stories without words. One piece was about his mother's immigrant journey to America. Another captured the feeling of standing alone on a stage in front of thousands of people. And the third was a musical love letter to all the teachers who had believed in him. On the morning of the concert, Alex woke up feeling calm and focused. He spent an hour practicing meditation, something Professor Petrov had taught him to help manage performance anxiety. Then he ate a light breakfast and went for a walk through Vienna's beautiful streets, listening to the sounds of the city and letting them inspire his musical imagination. Professor Petrov, now using a wheelchair but still sharp as ever, arrived at Alex's hotel in the afternoon. They spent an hour together, not practicing or talking about music, but simply enjoying each other's company. The relationship between teacher and student had evolved into something deeper. They were now artistic partners and true friends. "Are you nervous?" Professor Petrov asked as they sat in the hotel's quiet garden. Alex thought about the question carefully. "I'm excited," he said finally. "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do." That evening, as Alex stood backstage at the Vienna State Opera, he could hear the murmur of the crowd taking their seats. The venue was completely sold out, with people traveling from across Europe and beyond to attend. Among the audience were his mother Rosa, now proud and successful in her own career as an advocate for music education, several of his childhood friends who had remained loyal despite his fame, and Sophie, the young girl from the hospital who was now 14 and healthy, studying piano herself. When Alex walked onto the stage, the applause was warm and welcoming rather than overwhelming. These people hadn't come to see a spectacle or a curiosity. They had come to hear an artist share his music with them. Alex felt the difference immediately. He sat at the beautiful Bösendorfer grand piano and placed his hands on the keys. As he began the first notes of Bach's Goldberg Variations, Alex felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. This was his language, his way of speaking to the world. Every note he played carried 10 years of growth, struggle, triumph, and discovery. The audience listened in rapt attention as Alex moved through the Bach with mathematical precision and emotional depth. When he transitioned to the Chopin Ballade, the piece that had started his journey, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. But it was during his original compositions that something truly magical happened. As Alex played his own music, telling his story through melodies and harmonies he had created himself, the audience realized they weren't just listening to a performance. They were witnessing the birth of a major artistic voice. This wasn't the boy wonder playing other people's music anymore. This was a mature artist sharing his own vision with the world. The final piece, his tribute to his teachers, built to a powerful climax that incorporated musical themes from all the classical pieces he had learned over the years, woven together with his own harmonies into something completely new, yet somehow familiar. It was Alex's way of saying thank you to everyone who had helped him become who he was. When the last note faded away, the silence that followed felt sacred. Then the audience erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. People were standing, cheering, crying, and calling for encores. Alex took his bows with tears streaming down his face. Not from nervousness or pressure, but from pure joy. In the front row, Professor Petrov sat in his wheelchair with tears in his eyes, knowing that the promise he had made to an 8-year-old boy 10 years ago had been completely fulfilled. Alex hadn't just become famous. He had become an artist who could touch souls and change lives through his music. As Alex finally left the stage after 3 encores, he realized that this wasn't the end of his journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter. He was no longer the boy wonder or the child prodigy. He was simply Alex, a young man who had found his purpose in life and was ready to share his gift with the world for decades to come. The 8-year-old, who had walked nervously into an audition room, had grown into exactly what Professor Petrov had promised he would become: a legend.